Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Conkle, Vice President of Editorial for GovExec. I'm privileged today to be joined by Customer Service Branch Manager at TSA, Nikki French.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And Rachel Swin, Customer Service Branch Support for TSA. Guys, I'm so happy to be talking to you today about TSA and the customer experience and all of the work that you guys have done in the last 6 to 12 months. But before we get into some questions, let's do a little bit of background on your roles and experience.
All right. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I started out as a TSA officer all the way back in 2007 in Manchester, New Hampshire, and then found myself down in this area in 2010, and I've been doing customer experience work at headquarters since 2015.
And Rachel?
Oh, wow. I am happy to be here as well, and I've been in the federal government consulting space for about 20 years. But prior to my current job with ASI Government, I was with PricewaterhouseCoopers Public Sector and Booz Allen Hamilton. And I've been dancing around customer experience my whole career, but there's a lot of really great stuff that feeds into it around instructional design, change management, and strategy. So it's a really good fit.
Yeah, you guys have a really unique relationship. We're definitely going to get to that in this conversation. But TSA has made some news lately. You guys just put out the first publicly available survey of multiple airports across the United States on how we're doing at TSA and customer experience. And TSA is responsible for, I think, something like 2 million plus screenings a day, protecting the nation's transportation systems. We're most familiar with people going through the airports. But let's talk a little bit about the evolution of customer experience, how we're leading up to this big survey that we just put out. Nikki, starting with you, because you've been there since 2019, I think, right?
Yeah. So TSA was actually designated as a high-impact service provider back in 2018, so we were one of the first from OMB. And it really gave us the ability to go forth to our leadership to say, hey, we've got to start focusing on customer experience. OMB says we have to do it. And then, we just kind of built on it from there. So we focused a lot on coming up with different customer experience training and trying to build that culture of customer experience with the frontline workforce, and focusing on the fact that we're public servants, we're here, safety and security is certainly number one, but with that comes being professional and respectful during screening.
So on the survey itself, let's dive in here.
Yeah.
Go back a few years, because you knew this was coming up, and you guys did a similar survey that wasn't publicly available 5 years or so ago, right?
Yep.
So you get into this process, we're going to have to do this big survey. It's going to have thousands of respondents, and we need to have the questions right. We need to have the process right so that the results mean something. So wind us back and get us to the point where you and Rachel end up working together, because this is one of the things I want to hit on. We don't get a lot of these stories where we talk about the impact of a contractor on a really important government mission project, but in this case, we can highlight it.
Yeah. So the two surveys were similar questions, but very different for process. So the 2019 survey was handled all by the contractor. They went out, they did it. We developed the survey together, but after that, it really didn't have any impact. This was much different. I had a much smaller budget, which required us to be extremely creative. And it was the ultimate group project, I think, is what we've really been saying. So, we had an industrial organizational psychologist that helped us go through the question set. Two, that's right. To make sure that
Not
we
one,
were.
but two.
Yeah. I mean, you need it. So I think one of the biggest things that we learned here is that everyone thinks it's really easy to do a survey.
Oh, yeah.
Just write some questions, ask the questions. How hard could it possibly be? It's extremely.
Well, if you want it to be good, and if you want it to measure what you're actually intending to measure, then you do have to hire the experts.
Yeah. So we actually expanded from 5 airports to 16 airports. And because I didn't have the luxury of sending out an entire contract team to go conduct this, we had to get resources from each of the airports. So we had 2 or 3 survey administrators that we then had to train on how to interact and conduct a survey. So
because you don't want it to come off awkwardly.
Right. And you need, people are used to talking to people, but you're not used to probably saying, hey, do you have a couple minutes to take a survey? You normally say no to those people. Mm-hmm. So that's a real art to be how do you engage? How do you smile and get them to trust you here really quickly in order to get them to say that they want to give you feedback.
And really quickly, the general purpose of this survey was to sort of ascertain how well is TSA doing on the front line with customer experience, correct?
Yeah. How confident are people in TSA? What's your overall satisfaction? Are the officers professional and respectful? We asked about wait time. We asked a lot. We crammed a lot into the 16-ish questions that we
We'll
asked.
get into some of the nuance, but also I know that you had issues even getting the budget to do this in the first place. It was not a simple process to actually have a team come on. It took a while, correct?
Yes, it took like over a year, probably.
Yeah. It felt like decades.
It did
Yeah.
because we were running out of time, and I didn't get my FY22 budget until the end of FY22, and then it's like, all right, you got to hurry up and execute this, because if you do it after, you only have until September 30th. So, it was a lot, and we didn't actually start the contract until January.
Yeah.
January of
We brought
this
on all the
year?
staff around January, so we had less than 5 months to to run this survey.
Because this happened in May.
May.
Yeah.
May
And-
1st to the 15th.
Yeah, and you have to make sure that you run a survey with TSA before Memorial Day, because you don't touch the airports between Memorial Day and Labor Day.
Okay.
So that was challenging. And then we were really concerned about making sure that TSA could publish the results.
Yes.
Because nothing was so painful as when I worked with Nikki in 2020, and you go to a party and everyone talks about how terrible TSA is. And I have the data that is not the case.
And you can't talk about it.
You can't talk about it,
Yeah.
And
You could, but you had to kill them.
but-
Exactly. Very serious.
No, that would affect the customer experience.
Yeah, that would be a negative. That's the ultimate negative customer
Exactly.
experience.
Someone who worked for TSA. But so that was one of the things I told our industrial organizational psychologist. I said, Sarah, if we do nothing else, we have to publish these results. Even if they're abysmal, we have to make sure that if TSA wants to, they can publish these results. So we had to allot 60 days. And that's the extreme side of things, but we wanted to make sure to be able to publish the results and get all the proper approvals all the way up through the Office of Management and Budget.
Yeah,
No,
it broke my heart that we couldn't share the 2019 results. Like, it was
Yeah,
the
we
worst
only talked
thing.
sort of indirectly about this.
Yes.
Right? You can compare a little bit.
Yes,
We'll
yep.
get to that. But Rachel, so you come in on short notice, basically, talk about your team, and then talk about the process. There are federal rules you have to follow in order to come up with questions that are okay to ask people, right? It's not like I can just write down questions to ask you guys. It's way more nuanced than that. So talk about your team, the expertise that you brought to the table, and how you sort of got to the point where we're about to go out with the survey.
So my team did the lion's share of the work. They really did. So we brought on the most magnificent person that we could possibly pick for this. It's Dr. Sarah Spradlin.
Okay.
And she works for Eagles, but she also is the CEO of her own company. And she has a wealth of experience in a variety of things, but in particular with survey design, she was just amazing. She did all of it. She did the training that for all the survey administrators and delivered it while she had COVID. I didn't even know about it until afterwards. And then she also spent a lot of time making sure that all of the questions met construct validity, which is ensuring that the question that you ask, you're actually getting the answer that associates with it. So one of the things, we changed some of the wording from the 2019 survey, just a smidge.
We didn't have Dr. Sarah in 2019.
Yeah, and they did a great job, but there was some nuance around, like, even the confidence question. Like, when you ask a passenger, are you confident in TSA? Well, to do what? To pat me down?
What does that actually mean, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, Dr. Sarah helped us put in the TSA officer's ability to keep air travel safe. And so, like, that's a small nuance, but it's really important, And then also, due to the Paperwork Reduction Act and, OMB A11 280 limitations on how many questions you can ask and how long the survey can take, which is all in the best intent for the American public, but that did confine us on, like, how many demographic questions we could ask. So we had to do a lot of creative stuff. For example, we couldn't ask them what airport they flew in or out of, which would make the data not that helpful to TSA, right? Because we didn't have enough questions to ask that.
Okay.
So instead, what we did was we created 16 different surveys that had their own unique QR code and link. And that was how we were able to determine what, airport they flew in and out of. There were a lot of, like, oh, okay, now we're doing this. Oh, okay, now we're doing this. In the whole process, And then because we involved, nearly, 200 stakeholders across TSA, we had to create, a SharePoint site and house all of their materials. We had, like, a toolkit. We had a script for them. We had the trainings available.
Right, for the administrators themselves.
Yes.
Right, which were TSA.
TSA employees,
frontline,
Yep.
Yeah, so it wasn't just officers. They had to be out of uniform.
Yep.
just so it wouldn't be intimidating for the respondents.
Right, because you could imagine how someone in full gear might look a little bit like scary
Yeah.
to a passenger who also could be stressed. I mean, I think that's something you have to address in these surveys too, is trying to gauge a barometer for how stressed is this individual that I'm talking to right now because of prior experiences even getting to the airport, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that was one of our questions we did work in. So one of the things we wanted to make sure to ask was to get kind of like a baseline barometer question for how people felt prior to arriving at the checkpoint. So it's like, what was your level of stress before arriving at the checkpoint? And that was helpful, if for nothing else, because it kind of puts the responses you get into context. And so that was the one, I think that was like our only demographic question we could squeeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's helpful too because there's a lot of things that TSA cannot control. And so that's what made this survey unique as well, is that this is just about your experience at the checkpoint. It's not about the airlines, it's not about, baggage fees or parking or traffic. It's literally just how was your experience at the checkpoint with these officers in this moment.
And that's the tricky wicket with customer experience at TSA. There's 1,000 touch points between the parking lot and when your plane takes off that influence your experience. But TSA has a teeny tiny piece of that, And so one of the things we learned, we did retrospectives with each one of the airports after the survey was done. It totally ruined Nikki's calendar for like a month.
Yeah, 16 90-minute meetings. Yeah, it was
16 90-minute meetings.
Well, we wanted to
intense.
show them their results.
Great time for a vacation.
Yeah. But it was actually really helpful because what we learned from them was that the survey administration itself was educational for passengers. You would go up to someone and the results were so positive, which Nikki will talk about later, but they were trying to look for people who looked angry at the end of it. They were
That
was
seeking
really
out
funny.
passengers that had been waiting a while or looked pissed. And so they went up to them and they were like, I got something to say to TSA. And then when you ask questions like, so what was your experience once you arrived at the checkpoint and from when you left? It was like, well, they were mad about the air conditioning.
Yeah, they're like, oh, well, this was actually fine.
Yeah.
It's like, right. Yeah, it's just like people don't understand the difference a lot of times. And I get it. Like, we used to always joke when I worked at the airport, like, people just lose their minds when they set foot in an airport.
Yeah.
Suddenly, like,
I do.
they forget everything.
have.
Like, you don't even know how to, like, behave. You can't read signs. You don't know anything anymore. And so people don't know, well, who's the airline? Who's TSA? What's the line moderator at the front that tells you, like, which line to go to? Like, that's not TSA either. There's just, it's just mass confusion. So it was interesting.
I mean, that's part of the challenge, right? And I love the point you made about getting the questions right, because I was thinking in my head as you were talking about the nuance. It's like sometimes in reporting, punctuation, grammar really matters. Like, like let's eat, grandpa, or let's eat grandpa. Like, there's a huge difference there. So even just the phrasing can be really important in ascertaining how someone truly feels. So let's get in. That process took a few months to get the questions right. And you had a couple of psychologists on the team.
Oh, yes.
Who are really focused on this sort of area. Then you have to run them through the flag chain. How does that work, just really quick?
Got to go through DHS and then OMB. So both departments have to approve the question set. And then once they sign off, then you're good to go.
Then you get your training. Oh, Rachel, go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, well, and we did hit a little bit of a wrinkle because we did have, a lot of questions. And part of that was because some of how we got this done, Nikki does a great job of managing all the stakeholders involved in customer experience. And there were some pre-check questions. I mean, that's one of TSA's flagship customer experience initiatives. And we wanted to ask some questions about that. And so we did do usability testing of the survey administration itself. So we went out to airports. Nikki did the most. I think you hit all the DC area ones and Colorado Springs and ran the survey. And that was very helpful because one, we discovered even when I commented on someone's awesome cowboy boots for a couple of minutes, it still only took 2.5 minutes to get through our survey. Especially because some of the questions have a natural kind of progression that people are like, oh yeah, strongly agree, strongly agree. And so we also adapted our survey after that usability test because we had two questions. What was the best part of your experience at the checkpoint today? And what was the most challenging part? And it was a multiple choice question where they could select from the OMB A11 drivers. And when we had the challenging question, most of the people we spoke to was like, I didn't have any challenges.
Right.
Which was, I was not prepared for that emotionally because...
Nice thing to know, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you give people multiple choice to complain. Like, typically you just choose one and you keep it moving.
Yeah.
But people are like, oh, what if I don't have any? what do I do? And we were like, oh, well, guess we have to update our survey.
Yeah, which was great because 78% of respondents said they had no challenges at all at the checkpoint, which we were not prepared for.
Never, like literally never did I think that would be the answer.
Yeah,
And
that's really good news.
No, it was the best surprise. I just wasn't what I would have
I wonder if
expected.
any of my ex-girlfriends would say no challenges. Probably not. Moving on.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have that experience. Ooh.
So you get questions approved, and then the training to administer the surveys.
Yep.
Let's talk about the results. There are some really interesting results here. And I'm curious about how you can sort of differentiate TSA from airports themselves. All airports are different. From airlines themselves, some are notoriously difficult to work with, have poor customer service. Some are quite good in the grand scheme of things. So let's talk about, you get some results. What are 2 or 3 that really wowed you or disappointed you? We gotta ask the good and the bad here.
Well, I mean, the good news is that most of them were like, we don't really have any bad news. We do have one area of improvement, but overall, I love all of them. I think we had 93% overall satisfaction, which is incredible.
93%.
93%. But my favorite is the confidence question. So again, that was the ability, your confidence in the TSA officer's ability to keep air travel safe. That was 94%.
94%.
94%.
94 or 93. Those are really, really strong.
Amazing. And the confidence is really important because that's why the TSA officers come to work every day. That's why I come to work every day. Like, our job is to keep air travel safe. That's what we're here for. And to have that confidence rating from the public is really meaningful. And it's awesome.
So taking your shoes off is worth it. You shouldn't complain
Worth
about
it. Don't complain about it. You're
Part of the
actually
safety
thankful.
process. The 94 is really strong to me because it's actually directly ties to your mission. The whole
Yes.
mission of TSA
Yeah.
is to protect the transportation system. And 94% of people believe that is what's happening.
Yes.
That's really strong.
Yep.
You said there was an area of improvement. What was that area?
Communication. So 75% of people did not use any materials to prepare for their trip. So, that's an area that we know, like, we've got to figure out a better way to communicate with people. How do people want to be communicated to? Is it more checkpoint signs? Is it finding out a way that we can, text them before, like the airlines do, or work with the airlines to provide a link to tsa.gov? So we're digging into that. It's a whole project in and of itself.
So more communication is desired.
More communication, and honestly, we had a free text box in the survey, and we had one that was like, you should provide snacks. Some feedback,
Nice.
which is obviously hilarious,
then
but-
they understood the
I agree with that, actually.
right? Like, who's going to give the snacks? I don't know. But the rest of it was really focused on communication. So we know that, like, there's no way we can over-communicate
Can
with
I
the
share
traveling
my
public.
favorite result?
Yeah, please do.
So one of the biggest improvements between the previous survey and this survey was in the score around understanding of why additional screening was required. And that was huge because it went up 18% from the previous time that we ran the survey. And what was awesome about that was that that's an area that TSA has focused a lot of energy. So between the original survey and this one, TSA launched this course called CX Demystified, which focuses a lot on what you were mentioning about the tie between customer experience and the mission, and all the resources that are available for officers. But then there's a lot of slides, which I was not subtle about working in there, but around communication and how clear communication is really important for customer experience. People buy the why. They want to arrive at their destination safely. And if you explain to them why they're being selected for the gunshot residue test or for a pat down or what was wrong in their bag that flagged the sensor, that's going to make them feel better about what happens next. And it's not an easy thing for all the officers to navigate because there is security sensitive information that they don't want to give to people, that are flying to keep everyone safe. And so there's a lot of focus in that course, and it's taught by someone who worked at the checkpoint that tells really relevant stories. And so since that course was introduced, they've seen this huge leap in those scores around additional screening. So that's very exciting.
And that was a project from going back a few years, right?
Yeah, which is like, you're like, thank God I didn't waste the last, 2 2 or 3 years of my life on this project for it to not pay off. So.
And that's just essentially ingraining customer experience in the culture of all the TSA frontline employees.
Yep.
And I would say, as an objective person, it sounds to me like that investment is paying dividends. I mean, if you have is it 18%, was it?
18% increase.
18% jump in just, I mean, that's an easy low lift thing. I mean, the training itself probably wasn't low lift, but the impact is huge.
Yeah.
What's some of the reception like at the top of TSA? I mean, you share these results, and they're publicly available. You can tell the audience how to find those.
Yep.
But what's the reception been like? And is there a chance that we'll also see these results potentially benefiting airports, who, like we discussed, all have different, they're all completely different, and even airlines potentially?
Yeah. Obviously, it's been incredibly well received. So, which is also a little nerve-wracking, right? Because whenever you survey the public, like, you don't know what you're going to get.
And you knew you were going to put it out publicly.
And I knew it was going out publicly, and I knew I was going to have to brief our administrator, like, no matter what the results said. So luckily for me, it was all good news. And so who doesn't want to give their administrator amazing news? So I think what he said was, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was something along the lines of like, these results are great, and I'm not surprised because we have an incredible workforce.
Yeah.
So,
and he was enthusiastic about getting the word out.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly for the frontline workforce, because they work so hard, and he was interested
really
in doing
hard.
it before the travel season
Yep.
too. So TSA hit a record. It was 1 day record.
yeah,
for,
the Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, they screened nearly 3 million that day.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so it was really important to make sure that they knew that, you know, the American public and the traveling public really appreciates their work. And so he was really enthusiastic about that as well.
It was great. I mean, you know, I can't ever beat that, though. That was our first customer experience briefing, was giving him these survey results, and I'm like, God, where do I go from here?
Well, that's my next question is, where do you go from here? So you've
Yeah.
done this now twice. Now we're publicly out there. Are there plans to continue this? I mean,
Yeah.
annually or every few years? How does this work now?
Yeah,
What
so
happens?
we'll have it biannually unless I get a budget increase, you know? So,
I like that.
yeah, no, but it's biannually, I think, is reasonable at this stage. And then, you know, we have to, because you need to give yourself time to make improvements between surveys. You don't want to just continuously survey and then never use the data that you're collecting. I hate nothing more than wasting people's time. So going through that effort and asking people questions, you've got to make it worth it. So we're going to be focused on continuing to improve communication, because we know we can't possibly overdo that. We're going to work on a CX demystified, like 2.0 class, like 201 level, maybe for managers. And then honestly, just to continue to harp on it. We'll continue to review the training and make sure that we're injecting professionalism and respect, because we want to maintain these results. We also have an agency priority goal. It'll be TSA's first agency priority goal, and it's focused on customer experience. So we have in there that we're going to maintain an 80% customer satisfaction. And we chose 80% because that's still above, you know,
4 to 5.
the average, you know. And it's hard to maintain this. Like it's not going to be an easy feat to keep it up. It doesn't mean that you get great scores one time and then you just think like, oh, we did it.
Yeah.
We've solved the customer experience
time.
problem.
We're good.
It's over.
Rest
So
on your laurels for the next 10 years.
I'll just retire, early retirement. So
Use those
yeah.
TSA benefits.
Yeah.
That may or may not exist.
They don't, but yeah.
Well, I think what's really interesting to me about the story of you two is that we have a federal employee who came up through the ranks of TSA, right? You've been on the front lines, and now you're directing customer experience across a very large organization with not a very large team, let's be honest.
No.
Yeah, the ROI here is pretty significant, and this is a huge undertaking that you've just done. And you did it in concert with a small contracting team.
Yep.
Teeny tiny.
With
Itty bitty.
but immense expertise, though.
Yes.
Yeah, power players. And I didn't even get to mention, the other full-time employee on the project who did all of the project management work behind the scenes.
Oh, we would have been lost without Tiffany.
Oh, yeah. And that was like one of the every single airport in the retrospectives was like, Tiffany was so helpful.
Yeah.
Because they were available 24/7 and took all the questions from the airports who in earnest really wanted to do this right. And so it was no small thing. We had like we had 50 artifacts and at least 7 trackers. We had 200 devices that we had to send out to the field and then retrieve. She borrowed them.
When we first went forward with this contract, we were like, all right, we know we need to do a survey, but my budget was so small that they were like, okay, so are you going to be able to provide the devices? Are you going to be able to provide the resources to collect the survey? And I was like, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll make it happen. And we had a bunch of conversations that were just like, all right, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I eventually found the right person in IT. And, I was like, what do you have? Like, can I get phones? And he was like, no, I don't have any phones. I'm like, can I get tablets? I know we used to have like a stockpile of tablets. And he's like, no. He's like, I get laptops. And I'm like, perfect. I will take what I can get. We will ship out these, 100 plus laptops all across the country, track them, and then figure out how to return them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like, it was wild.
You guys
but you
are
got
in
to
the
get
trenches
creative.
every day. Yeah, creativity. But you guys, it's
Perseverance, definitely.
There's always this myth, I find, a lot of times when I talk to feds or go to events, and the contractor angle doesn't get either the respect or the discussion sometimes I think it merits, but it's such an important part of the process. I mean, contracting workforce is a huge part of what government does.
Yeah.
This hits to the core of what TSA and DHS writ large has for a mission. And there's a really strong need for sharp contractors to augment the federal workforce. We talk about this all the time in technology, in customer experience, where you can only hire so many federal employees. There's always job shortages.
Absolutely.
And so the government leans hard on these contractors. But you guys are, in this process, it was expedited. You had 5 months or less to really get this done.
Yeah.
And I mean, just talk about briefly, both of you, on the day-to-day, like leading up to this. This is not like, we're doing weekly meetings, Nikki, Rachel talk here and there. This is like every day, all day.
Oh, yeah.
Literally every day, all day.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, Nikki's budget got cut, and she had to do more with less. And then between our previous contract in 2019, 2020, and now, customer experience has blown up. So there's an executive order. DHS established a customer experience directorate.
A11 guidance, 2B, right?
Yeah, so we are all pivoting to address that now. But that's a lot. So the work tripled, and she still got the same budget that she had for the survey previously.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. They're like, but you can figure it out.
You'll figure it out.
So day to day, I really help her a lot with the strategy stuff. So my team was completely focused for the first year of our contract on just getting this survey out and doing it right and analyzing the results and reporting them. And so we had to make sure that we just had, everybody was a power player on the team. And I could easily keep 10 people fully employed working, a 40-hour week.
If only.
Yeah, for Nikki, but we really only had 3 full-time people with some additional expertise, like 3 additional experts on the team.
Yeah.
And so that was intense, but we made it work.
We did, somehow. But you've got to, you have to prioritize. And we really had to just say, this is all my team is working on. We've got to get this survey out. We do not have a lot of time. So my team of feds helped out as much as they could. They were reaching out, contacting people, trying to, make sure that all the right people actually showed up to the meetings, because you can schedule a meeting with the field, but they work shift work. They, are not sitting at a desk. So it was a lot of coordination, but it was everybody's main focus was to get this survey off the ground so we can collect these results and then move forward from there. So.
And we also built in some flexibility in how we administered it. So there was 2 weeks that they could run the survey, but they only had to do it for 7 days, because there could be a security incident at the airport, which would make it so that you couldn't do the survey that day. You're all geared up for it. And so, that was really important too, was that, you didn't want to impede the mission. This is supposed to enhance it, not get in the way. So that was helpful. And then also when we did the retrospectives with each of the airports, we got a lot of really good feedback on how we can do it even better next time, and be even more clear in our guidance that we provided.
I love the dynamic way you guys riff off each other. It shows the respect, but also this is a great example for a lot of other federal agencies are in a similar position, and public sector organizations across the board. They don't have big budgets often. Sometimes budget cuts happen. Sometimes congressional funding is delayed. It's just the nature of the game, but you guys find a way to make it work. And we are having this conversation in sort of a time where CX is being elevated. The administration is focused on it. There's an EO you talked about, Rachel. There has been updated guidance every year now that puts more boxes to check, more things you have to do. And I wonder what advice, perhaps, give me 2 or 3 things from each of you to the folks that are out there who listen to this and think, we have a similar disposition. We have to do this. What can we do? And maybe, Rachel, direct yours a bit more to the contracted side, if you will. I mean, not everything, but it's the job that you know so well. What advice would you give to practitioners out there to try to learn something and do something like what you've just accomplished?
Ooh. Well, I think having people that you trust, and I think that goes for the government folks as well. I mean, hiring someone that you trust, because she couldn't be day to day and helping us with all the nitty gritty behind the scenes of like our 50-page comms plan and all the communications. She just couldn't do it. And I think the same goes for hiring your team. Like, you really need to have people that you trust, because when everybody has to be a power player and the work is tripled, but the budget hasn't expanded, you've got to make sure that you really trust people to deliver on their piece of the pie. And then one of the things I always like to talk about with the customer experience space is, I think, and this is again towards the government people, but you got to be kind of brave, and perseverant. I mean, Nikki was determined to get this done, regardless of what the results said, and publish them, And so here we are, and it's a starting place. If they had been really bad, we could have focused our energy on that kind of work. So I think those would be my pieces of advice.
Nikki, what about for you? And cater your remarks maybe toward more the people in the federal space who, we know the realities of how it can be day to day, but there are a lot more things they have to do now.
Yeah, you have to do it. And so I think it's okay to take a moment and wallow and vent somewhere, and then you just got to get it together, and you have to figure out a way to make it happen. There is a way. There's always a way that you can figure something out. You just have to network within your agency, talk to people. I didn't know the IT guy before I reached out. I was just assuming that I could find somebody, you have to get creative. And I don't even think of myself as a creative person at all, but I guess when it comes to work, I'm creative. but you can't give up. And prioritizing, I think, is also the other main thing. Choose one thing, because if you try to just say, we're going to fix customer experience, or it's too big. So you have to figure out, where can I start? And this was a big project. I couldn't have done this without a budget. But there's plenty of things that you can do with existing data within your organization. So I run the contact center as well, and that's, they have a wealth of data there. And so if on the years that we're not able to collect the survey, we will still have all of this wonderful data from the contact center that can show us airports that have higher rates of complaints, lower rates of complaints. What are the types of complaints that are coming in? Is there, a particular issue that's popping up? So I think creativity and resilience are the 2 things that you must be good at.
And I would also add on to that, being smart about how you manage the experience of customer experience projects.
Oh, for sure.
Apply some of the same human-centered design, change management, all of that to the project itself. So we were herding buttered cats to pull this off with 200 stakeholders across the agency. And if you made it miserable for them, and you didn't know, most of Nikki's team is people who've worked in the field. And that's really helpful too, because you know what they're up against. You don't ask them to do things that are unreasonable, and if you make that process, fun for them and appreciate their efforts, and they get something out of it, they're going to work with you again. And, that's really important in the customer experience space, building consensus and being able to tie it to the mission and understanding it. And so, I think all of that really fed into how we pulled this off.
Yeah.
One other specific thing in the nuance of this is putting the contract out in the first place.
Oh, gosh.
I've heard others in the space have issues with how the language is. Are they too prescriptive? Are they too broad? How did you arrive at something that was flexible enough to do what you had to do, but also, specific enough so that you knew what you were going to get? I know,
you've got to be vague enough so it can cover enough, but it also has to be specific enough so that people can actually bid on the work and understand what you're talking about. So it's not easy, but you can do it. So the survey was the big thing. So that was the number one focus in the contract. And then we had, vague things in there like, work on the strategy and improve strategy and what was the other thing we had, like expand on the existing
organizational
roadmaps
assessment.
and like we used some big terms that can be interpreted multiple ways. So
And did you
more
work?
creativity.
Did you have to work with a procurement team to do that, or were you? I'm picturing you sitting there writing the stuff yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean we write it and then they look through it and say like, it's good, or you need to be more specific here or more vague there. But
And she has a really good contracting office or core
yeah.
on her
Yeah, I
team
have
that
two
helped
big
with
cores.
that.
Yep.
So that was helpful too.
Fascinating conversation. One last question.
Yes.
When are we going to see some of these potential changes, including maybe more communication from TSA? Is that something we could see in the near 6 to 12 months? I mean, what do you think might happen there?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely ongoing. We've tons of meetings scheduled to continue to talk about these results and socialize them throughout TSA, but also in the public space. But yeah, no, we're working, and you'll hopefully continue to see improvement.
Good deal. Love the conversation. I just want to thank you so much for making the time, Nikki and Rachel. There will not be a interview customer experience survey after this interview, but I would love to have you back again. And thank you so much to our audience.